I'm now joined by Robert Spitzer. He's a Professor Emeritus of Political Science at SUNY Cortland. Thank you very much for your time, Robert. I hope you don't mind me asking, but as a teacher, you're a professor, perhaps you're a parent too. How did you feel when you first heard the news of this shooting?
Well, how I felt right off the bat was that I've seen this movie before, and too many times before. It raises the fear of any parent, of anybody who goes to school, of anybody who stands in a classroom and teaches students, and who thinks about security issues. I will say that at the college where I have taught for many, many years, and at schools all across America, there is more and more a focus on and concern about security and safety issues. But having said that, and even in the face of this terrible, senseless, pointless shooting, which very much, I think, echoes the facts and particulars of the Sandy Hook shooting from 10 years ago in terms of how it unfolded, what happened, and so on. Even in that context, public schools and colleges and universities in America are really very safe places statistically. And that's that's cold comfort to the families of those affected by this most recent shooting. But we need to remember that much has been done in terms of safety precautions, and that school children in schools, and there are over 100,000 schools, public schools in America, and they teach over 50 million children on a daily basis, that statistically speaking, school children are safer at school than they are on the streets, and even than they are in their own homes.
I must admit, as a foreigner living in the United States with young children, it's quite alarming when your child is being taught to hide under desks in case of the bad man coming into school. But nonetheless, I wanted to ask you to listen to Senator Chris Murphy here. He made a very moving speech in Congress this afternoon. Just take a listen.
This only happens in this country and nowhere else. Nowhere else do little kids go to school thinking that they might be shot that day. Nowhere else do parents have to talk to their kids, as I have had to do, about why they got locked into a bathroom and told to be quiet for 5 minutes just in case a bad man entered that building. Nowhere else does that happen except here in the United States of America, and it is a choice. It is our choice to let it continue. What are we doing?
What's your response to that? Is it a choice?
Well, in the way he's framed that, the answer is yes, because there are many, many things that could be done that could get directly at the kinds of vulnerabilities that give rise to this kind of shooting. There are many public policy answers to the circumstances that give rise to this circumstance. And Senator Murphy, representing Connecticut, which is where Sandy Hook took place, is reflecting the sentiment and the fact that while America does not have higher mental health problems than Americans don't, as compared with people in other nations, we do not have a higher crime rate, but we do have a higher murder rate, far, far higher, and that's because of guns. There's no question. There is no tool, no implement that's more effective at killing another human being, no interpersonal weapon or item, than a firearm. And in terms of age limitations, in terms of types of weapons, in terms of large capacity magazines, so-called red flag laws, stricter and more effective background checks, there are many, many policy options that could be enacted that would get directly at the kinds of problems that are reflected in this particular shooting in Texas today.
A Texas Attorney General suggested a solution to school shootings, in fact, directly after this particular school shooting, that one answer could be arming teachers themselves. As a teacher, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a terrible idea. The last thing you need is amateurs with guns, even if they have good intentions. And that's what arming teachers would be. I mean, if you have a teacher who has police training or who has military training, well, that's one thing. But obviously, the overwhelming majority of teachers in America don't have that sort of background. And if you give them firearms, you're raising the risk dramatically of other unintended harm, of guns being stolen, of misjudgments occurring where people fire a weapon hoping to do something good and wind up doing something bad, of a suicidal teen or suicidal teacher deciding on impulse to use that firearm to kill themselves. There's overwhelming evidence that arming teachers would only exacerbate the gun problem, and that's why teachers, administrators, and others connected with schools have been uniformly opposed to that idea.
Let's face it though, we're facing an incredibly high wall here. Like in Buffalo just over a week ago, there are often conversations about what needs to be done. There are thoughts, there are prayers, there's moments of silence. Legislation will likely pass the House but not kept through the Senate, and then everyone seems to move on. How long will it continue like this?
That's an important question. I would say two things. One, this is an election year. Now, one thing that will push the gun issue aside is the fact that there are many other issues that American voters are concerned with: the inflation, energy concerns, the environment, many other things. That tends to crowd out the gun issue. Nevertheless, when you have a repetitive series of these kinds of shootings, it brings that attention back to the fore. And there's something else that's kind of a wild card, which is that the Supreme Court of the United States is poised to deliver a decision which I am firmly convinced will be a decision that will significantly expand gun rights for average Americans and may well provide a constitutional protection for Americans to carry guns, civilians to carry guns in society, which would be a decision that would be utterly contrary to our own legal and political history, by the way, but I think they are on that path, and I think we will see that decision within the next month or so. And if that happens, conflated with these kinds of shootings occurring, it may be a way that will propel this issue into the election, and that I think would be good, precisely because that's why you have a democratic process, to engage with issues that confront the country and get the voters mobilized to pay attention and react accordingly.
Robert, thank you so much for your insight this evening. Robert Spitzer for us there, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at SUNY Cortland.